IIHS. But before I do, I was going to make them all individual videos, but, because I'd have to redo the history of all the companies and all the crap, I'm just going to make it one gigantic big video. So if you're here, congratulations, and we're going to see if we can make it through. If you're wondering why content hasn't been coming out, longer videos take longer to edit, and I don't mean, I do very minimal editing. If something takes too long or I ramble for too long, I cut it off, like I probably will here. But, what takes the really long time is the exporting. For some reason, Filmora, which is the thing that I use, it's either really fast on fast videos or really slow. It can take like an hour and 30 minutes, because remember, we have terrible Wi-Fi here in Florida. So it's not my computer, it's the Wi-Fi. It takes forever to upload and download, and also I cannot be using my computer during that time. I've seen it skyrocket to like 6-7 hours when I'm actually using the computer, at least the Wi-Fi functions of it. It's ridiculous. I'm looking into Starlink. Anyway, so the NHTSA and IIHS, before we talk about, the discrepancies, what's happening, and what you should actually care about, let's talk about, just how they came to be. So first of all, the Takata airbag thing, I just want to mention this. Honda and Takata have known about this since 2004, right? Very, very clear, yeah. Someone was actually injured by this, right? They've known about this since 2004, and every other major company has known about it since 2009, and then a recall came out in like 2013, 2014. Stop using the damn airbags. That's all I've got to say. Right, guys? Cars, to this day, most of them still have Takata airbags. If they couldn't figure it out once, they couldn't figure it out again. I'm not going to talk a lot about this situation, but just, really quickly, essentially what happened, they wanted to save money on the gas that they usually used for airbags, so they chose a more explodey one. Also, what I find extra funny, the money that they saved on using a cheaper gas, they spent in doing all these precautions to make sure that it wouldn't, explode more than it should. Ended up doing that anyway, and they're still making it so annoying. We've already known about this. Just stop using the damn airbags. Anyway, so NHTSA and IIHS, what is the difference? If you have, like, the Euro NCAP or anything, we're just going to be talking about, freedom things here. Just because, as an American, it's hard enough to track things with our own agencies rather than track down things in foreign countries with my terrible Wi-Fi. Anyway, NHTSA, this is the government one, right? Our government pays for this, and they crash test cars, give them ratings, and then you know, right? And then they tell you. And then they make, changes. They're the ones who make all the cars look the same. We'll get into that later. The IIHS is by insurance companies. It's called the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, or IIHS. The IIHS was created in, where is it? Yes, in 1959 by 3 major insurance associations representing 80% of the U.S. auto insurance market. Again, remember, I'm just paraphrasing here from the Who We Are page about IIHS. At first, their entire job was just to kind of support other efforts, like NHTSA trying to get the government involved with this. Later, they just said, all of you are incompetent, and they started running tests of their own. Remember, insurance companies have a lot, right? But a book that really changed the tides was Unsafe at Any Speed. Now, really quickly, I'm just going to give you an example to summarize how the market was at this time. Ford, remember, it's very hard to find proof of any of these things, especially when they happen in the 1960s and they're not on the internet, and I don't live near a place where this happens, so I can't find, old newspapers or anything. So enjoy this photo of a Ford factory. Ford came out with many, many, many different inventions, such as a steering wheel where if you got in an accident, it was supposed to cup around your body and collapse, right? So that, the pole wouldn't stabby through your chesty. That's how it works usually in normal cars. And you may have thought that the other car companies would be happy. They'd be like, great, Ford, thank you for making... No. They were not happy about it. They said, Ford, take this ad down immediately. This is blasphemous. This is awful. Because remember, back in the day, they were just shitting out cars, right? They came up with a design, they stamped the sheet metal, and they kept the machines going. They didn't want to have to change the entire thing, to make these new steering wheels. Not Ford, but, Chrysler, GM, really just American car companies at the time, because remember, this is like the 60s and 70s. Toyota, they weren't in the big conversations. No one really was, right? It was mainly just the big 3 back then, as, it was for a very long time. But, the other two, they were like, Ford, take this ad down. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. So Ford took down the advertising, and they still kept some of the features, but they tuned it really down. And the most concerning thing about this was the major reason why they didn't want Ford to run these ads. Because the government was currently in La La Land, thinking that, cars are safe, people die, it's fine, because they bought the car and they drove it like an idiot, and now they're dead. That's where they were, right? That's where the government was. They didn't care at all about car safety. They had regulations, sure, but not the aggressive ones that we have today. Just kind of, don't make the car explode out of the factory. That's pretty much it, right? If they had any regulations at all, especially at this point in time. Unsafe at Any Speed was a book written by this man and by Ralph Nader, very well known, and he just talked about how unsafe cars were at the time. I believe, remember, I'm not sure about this. Again, a lot of my information, just tits and tads on the internet. That's how most stuff goes nowadays. Again, this is a book written 70 years ago. It was very influential. I believe what inspired this, I heard this on a podcast that I was listening to for this video. I do research. And I believe he recounted where he was in like a taxi cab or something, like one of those old-timey vehicles, going like 70 on the freeway, and he said that it was like terrifying and being in a tin can. So the main point of this entire book was talking about how unsafe the Corvairs were. These small, light GM vehicles, talking about the issues that they had, how cheaply they were built, and just how bad they were, right, in car crash safety. He ended up speaking to very influential people, and he helped start, get the government kind of kicking off to start and, actually caring about this, right? So that's kind of how they came to be. If you don't know IIHS, they're better than NHTSA for many different reasons. So here, this is a Dateline episode. Essentially, the difference between the IIHS and NHTSA. The NHTSA is funded by the government, which means they usually do the bare minimum, right? They do front-end crashes, side crashes, rollover, that's it. That's all they do. The IIHS in, the 1990s came out with what is called a frontal overlap crash test, where only, 25% of your car's front end gets hit. Now, nowadays that's all modern stuff, right? Our cars can survive avalanches or whatever. But back then this was very influential because your car's bumper was in the front, not the side. So this ended up being very dangerous for most common car models. And so the NHTSA, if they found something dangerous, they just, government, do something about it. The IIHS didn't have that privilege, just to talk to the government and say, hey, do this, Now, that doesn't mean that the NHTSA didn't use some of the IIHS's research to make the precautions that they did for vehicles, but it was much harder for the IIHS to do anything to the government, right? And remember, the government, in my opinion, it should make sure that things are, not going to explode or cause, like, terrorism or anything. But, if someone makes a bad product, they don't really, you know what I mean? So the IIHS mainly was talking to consumers, and they used Dateline NBC, when this was still, fresh and new, to make episodes like this, just talking about it, right?
This is how the government crash tests new cars at 35 miles an hour into a flat wall. It's considered a good test of the car's seat belts and airbags, but it may not be telling you everything you need to know about the safety of your car. This is a different kind of crash test. Faster than the government's. And too fast, according to some automakers.
Yeah, so the IIHS was essentially pioneering these new types of car crash tests, which made the cars look like shit. And all these auto manufacturers, it was kind of like the Ford thing all over again. Stop it! They were like, no accidents happen at this speed. You're stupid. You have no idea what you're talking about. You suck. We all hate you. I remember Toyota even sent an issue. Remember, Toyota wasn't... Nowadays, if something goes wrong, Toyota can cover that. Back in the 90s, Toyota was still big. They were one of the biggest. But they still didn't have that, that power yet, that oomph yet. So they just sent in a letter, and they're like, our cars are perfectly safe. Stop looking into that. Which only made them look into it more. So the IIHS more focuses on consumers, telling them not to buy it unless, government-y, intervention-y things. So if you're wondering who sets the headlight things for, how high the headlights have to be and everything, because we are going to talk about that, that's, of course, the NHTSA. The IIHS doesn't set anything. That's, of course, why all crossovers look the same. Now, I'm going to do probably the most impressive thing you can ever see in your life. That, I can say, is a Dodge. That is a Lincoln. That is a Buick. That's a Ford Escape. That's a Nissan Rogue. That's a Porsche Cayenne. That's a Chevrolet Traverse. That's a Toyota RAV4. That's a Mercedes GLS. That is a Infiniti EX350. That is a Hyundai Santa Fe. That's a BMW of some sorts. That's another BMW of some sorts, more wagony than the other one. That looks to be an Acura. That's a Volvo. That's a Audi. That one's a, what's it called again? Mazda. That one's a Lexus. That one's a Toyota again. That one's a Jeep. I can definitely tell the difference between most of these. That's a Volkswagen, that's a Honda, that's a Mitsubishi, and that's another Mercedes, and that's a Jeep, and that's a RAV4 again. If you are into cars, you can definitely tell the difference. Honda, that's iconic. Toyota, I used to drive this car. I know what it looks like, You can tell the difference, but still, you notice everything's kind of in the same place. And we just love white cars for some reason. They're lighter, They are actually better having a lighter car. I have the seafoam green, right? One of my cars is deep red. The other one is seafoam green. The seafoam green one is always just lighter in the summer because of refraction and crap like that. So let's look at death rates over the years, right? The year that the IIHS was founded. Remember, they weren't actually doing crash tests work here. Was right about there, 1959. From there, it continued to skyrocket, and then the IIHS started, let's do crash safety tests. Okay, they were still doing them. Then it came way down, and then, there's waves and humps, not because, they were slacking or something like that. Car makers are really, really, really good at finding ways to cheap out on stuff. So they probably found, we can fill our bumpers with foam instead of actual bumper things, and the IIHS, and then the NHTSA regulated that, and then they did something else, and then regulated that again. It's been pretty good so far, although we had a huge spike in 2021, which was very bad. Went from, 39,000 in 2019 to 46,000 and 46,000 in 2022. It doesn't show 2024, but you get it, right? Just the deaths are coming down gradually. The first thing we're going to talk about today is pop-up and down headlights. If you are a fan of Japanese cars, which I am, you have probably definitely seen these. Now, they were used by the Corvette, but on that American brands, you'll see these in a lot of the smaller Japanese brands. These are more in bigger, more flashy American cars. And also, you'll see these in older Porsches and you'll see these in older Ferraris, but mainly just smaller Japanese lighter vehicles. A great example is the Mazda Miata. That just sounds wrong to say. I haven't said it in a while. Anyway, yeah. These pop-up up and down headlights seem cool. In fact, my favorite Toyota. Toyota's made a lot of cars, Celica GT, Celica Regular, or Supra. My favorite is the Toyota Celica Alltrack. It is just so cool, and this one has pop-up and down headlights. I think that's just so neat. I could jabber on about this car all day and how much I love it with the weird little thing. Anyway, this has pop-up and down headlights. I'm just using this as an example of relating the issue to something, about me. So, imagine, number one, I'm going to start sounding like the automakers here. This is a valid point. How often do you hit a pedestrian? Okay, now how often do you hit them exactly where your headlights are? Very, very rare. It's usually in the middle of the car or off to the side slightly. Essentially, pop-up and down headlights were, quote, a pedestrian disaster. They were never, to my understanding, remember, this might be totally different, I just live under a rock. I've done research, I don't believe they were ever officially banned. I believe they just stopped using them as fines and crap like that. But, yeah, so why, right, out of all reasons, why did people, why didn't we really like these? Why were they banned? They just said, if a pedestrian falls on that, it could cause danger. Now, I'm going to say why that is total bullshit. Number one, this Mazda Miata close-up is perfect. It's not something like steel or stainless steel, God forbid. It's plastic, right? I'm sure if I sat on that thing, number one, it just retract down immediately. And number two, it just crumbled. Like a cardboard box. It's not like it's made out of titanium or something, and it's not going to break. I'm sure if a pedestrian fell on that, it would just either snap back or retract down, right? And instead of making safety precautions, they just said, nada, right? So, if these aren't good, then what about this? I'm just talking here. Just let me cook. First of all, this is stainless steel, and it cannot retract if someone falls on it. It's definitely not plastic, and also, you may, just a tiny little thing, maybe it's only me that notices this with my high, intellect brain, but this covers about maybe 3% of the entire car's face. That's the whole damn car. Maybe I'm just way out on a limb here. I don't think I am. I think this is actually insane. Why don't we care about this? Why don't we care about this? Pop-up and down headlights, apparently, I've seen some of the letters they wrote to, the CEOs telling them to stop using them. You would have thought that these things were like bazookas with TNT and knives that sharpen themselves, and then they would shoot at pedestrians as you were driving by. And yet a stainless steel literal bullet that can travel so fast, that's fine. And again, I'm not hating on the Tesla Cybertruck. Not at all. It looks ugly. It looks like a trash can. Other than that, dumpster. Other than that, it's not a bad car. It's a very interesting car. This is a concept. It shouldn't be a road car. This just shows you, this is my first example, just to show you kind of how selective they are. Something like this, whoa, no, so spooky, woo. That's so dangerous. Pedestrians are dying left and right. That's fine. It's Tesla. It's an American company. They pay taxes or whatever. It's fine. Just go have fun. They're more like a mom sending their kid out to play than actually doing anything about this. And yet we don't care. Now, again, I'm not one of those people that are like, these trucks are killing us. We're all gonna die. Wah! I seriously couldn't care less. But the only reason why I'm even mentioning the Cybertruck is just to compare the logic. So if this is deadly, that's fine. Sure, great, amazing. Another thing that, I really don't really like, my neighbor, this was the entire inspiration for this video. He owns an Audi Q5. Remember, it's Florida, it's all fancy old people. And I had just gotten home from my vacation and I needed to go grocery shopping because I was away for about 2 weeks, right? And, he's pulling out of his driveway, I'm pulling out of mine. We reach the stop sign and I cannot see his turn signal. It's not like I hit him or plowed past him because I didn't know he was braking or anything. But it's still not a good system. They're all the way down here, and they're tiny little lights. Look at that. That's so tiny little lights. It was almost impossible to see, The turn signals are, in fact, down there. It's so that you can have a wider trunk. So why would Audi make this design? Is it because Audi hates people? No, that's because the NHTSA and the government decided lights cannot be on any movable body work, right? So the idea here, remember, the reasons why they ban all of these items is kind of like a Wattpad horror movie, describing how it's going to happen. They parked on a dark and dangerous night. They turned on their hazards because the engine had failed. And the mean trucker man pulls up behind them and their tailgate's open. And they don't see the turn reverse lights and they get plowed and burned to death. And it's all these stupid reasons to ban this bullshit. And we get crap like this. This is worse. I would much rather have the turn signals and everything be up there than down there, because at least I could see them on a normal day. They took that singular, if the NHTSA can say that frontal overlap crash tests aren't that big and that's why they don't need to do them, then can't they say that, that situation doesn't happen that often? Because let me tell you, I would rather have my car be optimized for everyday driving and be awful in certain conditions. I drive a Prius, right? Than be prepared for anything, right? That's why I don't own a Land Cruiser. I'll just go ahead and afford one. That's out of the picture. But yeah, so you would think that they would favor everyday driving rather than the single mean trucker situation. Nope, they favor the single mean trucker situation. Something like the RAV4, again, you can see how big the taillights are. That does nothing, that does nothing. The reverse lights are there, the turn signals are there, and the brake lights is there. This tiny little thing does about 80% of what the taillights do. This is all useless, and then you've got the reflectors. I think this is actually a good way of doing the taillights. I'm not criticizing or chastising Toyota. I think this is great. It's much better than what Audi did. It also just looks weird. I really hate Hyundai, right? If you're new to this channel and you drive a Hyundai, I'm really sorry. This car company annoys me so much to my very core, right? I'm not a person that hates on normal everyday cars. I love the Prius. When people hated on the Prius, I said, hey, I'm going to be chuckling all the way to the gas station. You enjoy filling up your Land Cruiser or whatever, right? But for some unknown reason, Hyundai, I hate them more than I have hated any other car company. First of all, the taillights look like creepers, which is already weird. The entire car is hideous. This is the ugliest car I have ever seen. There's a style line for some reason. Ugly, hideous. And also, again, the taillights are so low. And again, the tailgate doesn't even open that high. It's just ugly. If a design is weird, like the Prius was weird, but it was so amazingly aerodynamic, it had an excuse to be weird. This is just ugly. And the most annoying part, the taillights flip up with the trunk. It's not like they were following the thing or anything. And you have supplemental lights down there that are also tiny and scampy and small. So what was the point, Hyundai? Come on. Why put them so low? And the car looks like ass. It doesn't look good, right? I'm sorry. It doesn't look good. That's all I have to say about that vehicle. Another one that kills me is the Tucson. I couldn't even find a picture of the Tucson. I couldn't even remember its name. I see one of these and I'm like, ugh, the Tucson. You see one of these and you're like, someone hasn't paid child support. That was, of course, a joke, right? That's a joke. Just being serious. First of all, you have this entire gigantic, hideous, by the way, taillight setup, and yet the turn signals and reverse lights are down there. I mean, what's the point of even having brake lights if they're going to be so low? And Mr. Government Safety Person couldn't care less. It's so annoying. Also, the Hyundai Kona. You have fake taillights here. It's like, when like a ladybug has, no, not a ladybug, a butterfly has like fake, eyes on their tail, so you think they're like attacking it, but actually the eyes are in the front and it flies away. That's kind of like this. I mean, it has fake taillights and then everything's down there. And again, it looks hideous. I think it looks awfully ugly and hideous, right? That's the first issue I have with them, right? Another issue is the front. Now, remember, the most important part of the taillights is when you're behind someone, right? You need to see their taillights. In the front, you're usually at an intersection, and it's okay, right, if they're a little bit lower. This is what I think, again, RAV4, Toyota. Toyota, come on. Another thing I love about Toyota, yes, they're boring, but you're never going to get a real, awful car from Toyota. It's very rare that, if at all, I can't think of one, that you get an absolutely terrible, unusable car from Toyota. Because they're just not weird enough, right? And I love that about them, right? I never have to, when I'm arguing with someone about car brands, they can never make the ugly or weird argument, because Toyota is the standard, right? And then we look at something like the Hyundai Kona. I mean, what is this? That's ugly, first of all. And also, why are they to the side? That just, this looks so ugly. I just can't help it, hideous. Why is it all down here? Why tiny little headlights for such a gigantic car? Ugh. Just so annoying. And then you have the Hyundai Venue. This is one of the last things we're going to talk about. The car culture here in the U.S. is small and useless, right? You have to admit, there are not as many, cars that are just straight up for utility, right? Get the sandbags, put them in there, drive to work. That's, the cars that we used to have. Now we have turds like this. All-wheel drive crossovers, which are one of the dumbest things ever. This is a 2014 Chevrolet Trax. It looks like an SUV. It is all-wheel drive like an SUV, and yet it has the trunk of a hatchback. These cars are just useless. They're good on gas. They're just sedans cosplaying, right? And not very well either. And even our useful cars are getting more stupid and more useless over, the ages. So what if we could make a truck the smallest for great gas mileage and the most usable car? A K-truck. First of all, you don't have a stupid, gigantic, honking trunk out of the, frunk out of the thing for no reason. Half of that's just empty space. I remember I forgot. I think it was one of my neighbors. He moved a few years ago. Anyway, he had this Camry, and I could see directly through the bonnet, directly to the grass. I could see the gravel. And it wasn't because it was a small engine. It was a decent-sized V4. But it was just a gigantic engine bay for the tiny little engine. It wasn't like micro-engine or anything. It was a decently sized engine. Don't get me wrong. But still, it was just a huge amount of front space. It was like a Cadillac DeVille or something, right? Came out like 3 feet. This doesn't have that, right? Peak efficiency. So essentially, they saw these, they see all these useless cars, and they think, wow, that's useful. We're going to ban it. First of all, California has some of the strictest emissions laws in the country, making it more difficult to register and use K-trucks on the road. California, you are my, Roman Empire. You are so annoying. Do you get that, California? They're just so bitchy. They never stop whining, right? Again, EVs, they're not good. They're not renewable. No one likes them. No one wants them, right? That's the truth. And also, Teslas, again, another very useful car, but the even more important thing, they're moving production to Mexico. California, you've essentially made it impossible, right? Good job, California. They've essentially made it impossible to sell any car that's not an EV or some hybrid or something. Within a few years, that's not even going to be an option anymore. And they're still moving production. It's not like a mutual agreement or anything. Tesla also doesn't. No one likes California. No one does, right? So K-trucks. The ultimately, just perfectly usable car. Are there some safety concerns with this? Yes. That's the interior. That's the front. Your legs are, in fact, 100% the crumple zone. Right? I mean, I would love to talk about how great K-Trucks are. You have to admit, they are shockingly not that safe. You know, like, again, I think what this speaks more to is not up to speaking about how unsafe K-Trucks are. It's more speaking about just how big and gigantic and heavy our cars are. But you can see, this K-Truck has a bigger, wait, let me see that, about similar sized bed as that Ford. And yet, it probably gets 38, 40 miles per gallon, and there's more interior room somehow. Worse interior, don't get me wrong, but still better interior. Is that a Tacoma? I think that's a Tacoma, yeah. Maybe. I can't tell. It's hard to identify trucks because I'm not a trucks person. These are just ultra usable. That's the same reason why we don't see K-cars over here. You know, the country that the car is in dictates what the car looks like. That's why we have a bunch of Chevrolet Traverses and all that happy horse shit over here in America, and we don't really see that in foreign countries. They just like compact cars over there, and that's fine. So is there some truth to the bannings? Yes, but I think it's so ironic that they're banning these little cars when, you know, all the other options that we have are just absolutely useless for anything that's not driving it, right? So, there's not much else to say on this topic with that. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And I finally filmed this video, thank God.